everyone. This is the PrOPEL Hub Masterclass on People, Performance and Wellbeing in Manufacturing. I'm Helen Fitzhugh and I am the Knowledge Exchange Fellow for the PrOPEL Hub at the University of East Anglia. What we do at the PrOPEL Hub is it's basically a major initiative to try and make better workplaces in the UK. And we work across 8 different universities and the CIPD to bring you the cutting edge evidence and research on workplace wellbeing, productivity and performance. Today we are doing a masterclass specifically on manufacturing, which I'm really pleased about. It's important to look after the people who make the things for us in the UK. And I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by such a stellar lineup today. We've got Professor Fiona Lettice, who will be introducing the session shortly, who's Pro-Vice-Chancellor Research and Innovation at the University of East Anglia. And then she will tell you about the other speakers we've got today, both academic and from practice. Just on a couple of Zoom points, we're doing a webinar today, which means your video won't show. But because this is a masterclass, what we're going to do is we've got the 3 fabulous speakers after Fiona's excellent introduction, and then we're going to have a panel. So you can input questions in the question and answer function. You can also put questions into the chat. While they're speaking, they won't be able to see your questions because that's how Zoom works. But we will collate them all and put them to you when we get to the panel, which will happen about an hour into the programme because it's a 90-minute programme today. So I hope you enjoy the event today. We're absolutely glad to have you with us and to be talking about people, performance and wellbeing in manufacturing. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Fiona and she can tell you a little bit about today's session. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Helen. Yes, so when I was invited to host today and sort of introduce the speakers, I jumped at the chance because today's workshop combines a few of my passions. I've sort of grown up, if you like, around manufacturing organisations in terms of both when I worked out in industry, but also in my academic career. I've been really interested in how organisations develop new products and services. So manufacturing, obviously, a very key part of that. As we know, the sector accounts for £191 billion worth of output, 2.7 million jobs. Average wages are 13% higher in this sector, and manufacturing also accounts for 53% of UK exports and 65% of UK R&D. So a hugely important sector to our economy, and also we do quite well globally. So we're about 9th or 10th in the world globally in this sector as well. So here at UEA, where Helen sits in the business school, we've also got the ESRC funded What Works Wellbeing Centre, and they focus very heavily on what makes good jobs, how to design interventions to improve workplace wellbeing and health, also developing strategies and initiatives to support that, as well as evaluating those and trying to work out what works and how you measure wellbeing at work. And just this month here at UEA, we're launching Productivity East, which is a brand new initiative for us. It was a really interesting collaboration between the Schools of Engineering, the Norwich Business School and the School of Computing Science, and really looking at how we drive productivity and innovation in the manufacturing sector. So why bring together those 3 disciplines? Well, clearly engineering and manufacturing go hand in hand, and the focus for Productivity East is about the manufacturing sector in particular. Computing, because as we know, there's increased digitization of manufacturing, so being sort of abreast of the latest computing technologies is really important in manufacturing environments. And then the business school, because we want to make sure that our graduates and the businesses that we work with think about leadership and management and health and well-being at work, as we know that that's important. You know, healthy workforce is a productive, innovative and creative workforce. So those 3 disciplines really go hand in hand. And the initiative has also involved working very closely with businesses so that we are delivering solutions and supporting businesses, and they've helped to co-design the programs that will run and the projects that will run through Productivity East. We've also worked with our local FE colleges, the councils and the LEP as well, so that we make sure we've got the pull through of skills through the process. So very focused on how we upskill and reskill the workforce, and I think particularly coming out of the pandemic that will likely be increasingly important, as we've all had to learn to work differently and remotely and adopt more digital tools to support the way that we need to work in the future. So today's speakers are fantastic, as Helen has already said. They're going to talk about a range of subjects, from conflicting goals and motivations in organisations, how to reduce the stress of competing priorities, a little bit about the impact of the pandemic, and also about lean and continuous improvement processes to support wellbeing and performance. So it's a great blend of academic, research and business perspectives today. We face increasing challenges in the workforce and in achieving work-life balance. I think a lot of us may have struggled with that in the last 18 months or so. And it's an ever-changing world with new technologies and new practices coming along all the time. So we need interdisciplinary approaches, and by that bringing together the different disciplines like I talked about earlier, but also different sectors as well and subsectors to try to address some of these big challenges that we face. And of course we need deep disciplinary insights as well, so people working very, very deeply within their disciplines as well as across disciplines and sectors. So a big thank you to Helen and the PrOPEL Hub team for organising today and helping us to work that through. So we're going to hear from 3 speakers. I'll introduce them one by one as we go through, and then we'll have time for questions at the end of the 3 speakers. So if you've got a question, jot it down or pop it in the chat and we'll pick them up at the end as we go. So our first speaker is Rebecca Penajak, and she's a lecturer in organisational psychology and behaviour at the University of Leeds, and she's going to talk particularly about conflicting motivations and goals in an organisation, how we improve creative problem solving and reduce stress of competing priorities. Her presentation will draw on her recent work with different manufacturing organisations on the tensions between sustainability and productivity goals. She'll particularly draw on insight from a case study organisation and the work around a pilot analysis tool to look at what was blocking progress in these key areas. So without further ado, I'll invite Rebecca to come on screen and tell us a little bit about her interesting work and project. Rebecca.
Thanks, Fiona. I'm just going to share the screen. Okay, should be, need to work out to, okay. I presume everybody can see that. I'll wait for a loud shout if you can't.
Becky, just need to pop it on the normal slide, the big slideshow, rather than your notes.
Oh, so it's sharing the wrong screen. Is that better if I make it big?
Yeah, that's lovely.
Yeah, okay, perfect. Okay, thanks, Helen. Yeah, I'm delighted to be here today to speak to you as part of this PrOPEL Hub event. And also another thank you, because this has given me an excuse to avoid some marking of statistics reset assignments. So lots of positives. So as Fiona signposted, I'm going to talk to you about a project that we did last year. It was led by Professor Kerry Unsworth. Then these other colleagues I've got listed on the slide, we were the other co-Is that were working alongside Kerry as part of delivering this project. So I'm presenting today as the kind of next co-I along working with Kerry on the project. It was funded by the ESRC Productivity Insights Network. And yeah, that's basically the background. So it's a pilot look at how can we start to really shift thinking for manufacturing organisations in terms of how they can do both productivity and also environmental sustainability in a way that would be fun and not overly stressful and demanding for employees on the ground. So of course we know that it's not just manufacturing organisations, we know that productivity is really key at the moment. So this notion of how can we keep doing more with the same. So I like it that there has been a shift from just always assuming that efficiency drivers or maybe lean methods are the only solution, because they're based on efficiency, so that's all about trying to do more with less, or the same with less. Whereas if we look at productivity, it's about how can we actually keep the same, keep the resources, but actually how can we work differently, more creatively to actually do more. So how can we improve effectiveness, but without having to work under the reduced resources strain. So we know productivity is important for lots of reasons. There's just some here on the slide, but you know, we need to keep increasing GDP. We need to overcome regional inequalities. We need organisations to be productive so they can compete in the marketplace. The more productive and successful an organisation is, the more scope there is for jobs in that organisation and that sector. But organisations are not just being taxed with being the need to be productive, they're also now being taxed with the need to be environmentally sustainable. Now, the reason that this case study focused on manufacturing was because there's a lot of manufacturing companies out there where there is obviously a high cost to the environment. A lot of the ways of manufacturing and producing products can obviously be not great for the environment. So this kind of approach that I'm going to talk about does apply across sector, but the reason for looking at manufacturing first was because, you know, there are things fundamental in the manufacturing processes that are not ideal for the environment that could do with looking at as a priority. You know, we know there's going to be lots of need to reduce carbon emissions, you know, achieve the net zero economy by 2050. So there's all these kind of high level things that seem like pipe dreams, but we're really going to need to start to think about how that would actually be possible. And the main take home from the presentation is actually, if we keep doing the same, we're not going to be, it's a standard thing in creativity and innovation. If we keep doing things the same, if we keep seeing things in the same way, we're not going to be able to create such a shift in thinking and practice to achieve such a different scenario. So we've got these two goals. We've got organisations need to be productive. We've got organisations need to be environmentally sustainable. Now, what happens at the moment in organisations, or typically happens, and where the academic literature has been focused today, is all about, we'll work with you, we'll help you achieve productivity, then we'll wrap that project up, we'll work with you again, and we'll help you achieve environmental sustainability. So all these big needs, these big goals are looked at in isolation, they're looked at in a vacuum, but we know organisations and sectors and the world we live in now is much more complex, and we're saying that you can't just take a kind of look at one thing, an approach that looks at one thing at a time, because you're missing then the ways in which these two goals could be hindering each other, where they could actually be scope for them enabling each other. So a lot of the focus has been either or. So we're either working on you being more productive, or we're working on you being more environmentally sustainable. But how can we actually help you do both simultaneously? So how do we start to start a rhetoric about both goals being delivered at once in a way where they're not competing with one another? So this is the main question. How can manufacturing organisations reduce environmental emissions and meet government regulations whilst remaining productive and in business? Now, these big organisational challenges are automatically going to put a lot of demands on employees. So we know that there's got to be a big shift in changes. That those shifts are only going to happen if people can the employees can be creative, if they can see things in new ways. At the moment, unless that shift happens, there's going to be really high demands on the employees, and it's going to be putting them in a situation of a lot of stress. So what we're saying in this work is that there needs to be a strategic look, kind of top down, that can really then help actually what employees would need to be doing on the ground. So as I mentioned, there's this issue of the goals are not being looked at in an interdependent way. So they're being looked at independently. So then we're missing all the places where they actually are conflicting and they're negative for one another. We're also missing all the opportunities where they could be enabling or more synergistic with each other. So we're asking this question: how do you get to strategic sustainability? So is there a tool basically that we can give organizations that can help them map their goals and understand how the goals influence one another? Now, we're saying yes, there is, and I'll talk you through this tool in a moment. But just to note that whilst this is about organizational level goals, it's very much focused on the people side and the employee side of things. So we're coming at this from an organizational psychology and organizational behavior background. So this tool that I'm going to present is actually rooted in understanding goals in psychology, rather than understanding goals in a more operations management or strategic management way of thinking. It's all these goals and things that organizations take on, they filter down to employees' tasks. So it's very much about what the people need to be doing. And the way out of this, the way to start to shift things, is going to be through people being creative, problem solving, reframing and redesigning. So it's very much kind of in the hands of the employees to make a shift. So, as I mentioned, is there a tool which could help us work out how we can even start to think about these things differently? So here's the tool. So it's basically called a goal hierarchy. And as I said, it originates in psychology. It's very simple. Basically what it does is it lays out different goals, and those goals are basically represented here in boxes. Now, what we would have here is we would ask an organisation to write down all the goals they have related to productivity and all the goals they have related to environmental sustainability. Some of those goals will be very abstract goals. So these ones we show at the top of the diagram, they'll be around long-term purpose, vision, values. The ones in the middle will be to do with more kind of strategic initiatives. They're more kind of medium term in abstractness, maybe things like your 5-year plans coming through to like project goals for a 12-month cycle. And then at the very bottom, we've got those tangible things, the short-term things, the regular tasks that you can see employees doing on the ground. Now, this example here is basically an organisational goal hierarchy based on a fictional university. So this one is where it started, us thinking, oh, wouldn't it be great if a university or a business school was designed in a way where they were thinking about research and teaching in a more coherent way. So the goals are not relevant here to manufacturing, but the picture of the tool is relevant. And then once we map the goals, so in other words, once we know what the goals are, so we've got all the boxes, we know the domain. So what I do as part of this case study work we've been doing is I might put the goals for productivity in one colour, the goals for environmental sustainability in another colour. And it's clarifying where are they at this level of abstraction. So whether these abstract top level visions, are they the medium strategic initiatives, are they the actual on the ground, seeing regular and tangible types of tasks. And the next thing is about the connections. So what this means is it's thinking about, if we take every single box, every single goal, if you can draw a positive line between those, so on here it's the blue, that's where doing one of the goals helps achieve the other goal. So we've got a kind of win-win, two birds with one stone type situation. In other places, what you see is we've got trade-offs. So where working towards one goal actually hinders you from achieving the other goal. So that's what we see with the red dots. Now, it's a different approach to what might happen normally from a strategic management or a performance management type perspective, because obviously we're coming at this from a psychology perspective, so it's going to be a different way of thinking. But what usually happens in those other tools is, for example, you might have management by objectives where goals are set at the top and then they're cascaded down. So you very much see, well, in theory you should see, in practice you should see those goals at the top and then sub iterations of those as you go down. However, what we realise is even if an organisation thinks they're doing management by objectives, you don't always see that consistent filtering down of goals. So we're trying to just literally say, right, what are you doing? How are you thinking of things? And just literally map that. And the key for us is to map it based on abstraction goals. So the top is kind of, who do you want to be? What's the vision? The middle is kind of like, okay, what are the bigger sets of tasks or ways of working on that are going to get you there? And then the bottom is, okay, what are you doing on the ground? And some of that could be actually much more to do with an old vision than it is about even getting to this new vision. So we basically do it in this way because we can have all the connections between the different levels of abstraction. It's not just about an organisation setting it and it filtering down, but actually what we can put on here is anything that's activated from employees, anything that's activated externally. So for example, a box might appear on the bottom row as a task because we've realised employees have just started doing it. Well, if we want to understand the organisation, we need to understand what people are doing just as much as you need to understand what we think people are doing based on some sort of strategic initiative that's been set. Something might happen externally in the market, or there might be an opportunity for something that then would basically trigger and create maybe a new box that are appearing on this goal hierarchy. So that's kind of where we're coming from. It's pretty simple in principle, and actually really powerful in terms of how much it can shine a light on things. Okay, so the first step is, as I was just saying, we need to get an organisation their goal hierarchy. So we need to understand, one, the goals for both domains. We need to understand the abstractedness, so what level they're at. Then we need to start working out the connections. So if we do this one, what does it mean for that one? Working out where there's good connections, positive things, and work out where there's negative things. And then what we can do afterwards is we can stand back and we can say, right, where are there negative connections? Is there a way of changing things, how we do the things, so that we can stop that negative connection? Is there more scope for positive connections if we change how we do things? Could there be lots of areas on a goal hierarchy that actually don't have any connections at all? And that would then show us that things are not very well connected here. And that has implications then for, you might have this goal set at the bottom, but actually if there's nothing up at the top, there might not be any kind of pull through for why we even do that task. And then it might get under-resourced, it might not end up being done. So there's lots of things we can basically draw insight from looking at the diagram. So this is just kind of a heads up of where it's going. And also just to say, it's so much complexity can come out of looking at this goal hierarchy, using this tool with one organisation. So this is very much just high level, giving you a flavour of what kind of things it would do, because I can't do it justice in 15 20 minutes. However, obviously feel free to email at any time if you want some more specifics. So what we did as part of this project was we did some interviews, we did some workshops, and we looked at some archival data of manufacturing organisations to work out how they speak about their things. How do they speak about their vision? How do they speak about their projects? How do they speak about their tasks? It was just kind of quite a quick and dirty start in finding what data we could during COVID when this project ran. The idea was just have a pilot go at using this goal hierarchy at this organisational level. So what kind of happened in the background was a developing of a methodology, so how we actually use language to work out where we put the goals and how we can actually infer connections between goals. It's easier to do when you're interviewing somebody and you're speaking to them live, because you can probe and you can ask these questions, and that's what we do with working from organisations. But actually the archival data still gives you a lot of information. I'm not going to go into the nitty-gritty of the extra method stuff. But this is just an example. This is the kind of things that come out of it, and we can see the goals, we can see the connections, we can see where there's negative issues. Now, what happened when we went through all of the data that we had, so based on some interviews, workshops, and archival data, we basically looked through everyone's goal hierarchy, so all the organisation's goal hierarchies, and we were looking for, what are the goals? Are they environmental? Are they how many are environmentally based? How many are productivity based? Is there a change between those depending on the level of abstraction in the goal hierarchy? We then started to look at the connections. So is there a pattern of these organisations have these sorts of connections, whereas these other organisations have another sort of connections? And we also started to look at, if we take the environmental goals specifically, so the boxes where environmental things were written, and we look at how embedded they are, so that means how many connections they have in with the other goals. Is there are organisations doing this differently? And actually, when we step back and we try to categorise all of our organisations based on this, we found there was two basically ways that organisations were currently operating. These manufacturing organisations were currently operating in practice. And this is what I'm just going to highlight to you now. So we found there was the first type. So all the organisations were really caring about the environment. They were motivated. They really wanted to, especially the senior leadership team, they really wanted to actually make a shift and be doing good things for the environment. Where we found the difference between this big pattern, these two different organisations, was in how they were approaching dealing with both of these goals, and also why that was then falling out as a pattern. So this is just all the nitty gritty of the exact example. I'm not going to get into now. I'm just going to keep it up at a level which I can cover obviously within the time. But this is just an example of one, so you can kind of see it in action. But what we found with this first type of organisation was, yes, they wanted to do the right thing. They wanted to be environmentally sustainable, but they were really focused on how to be environmentally sustainable. So what this meant was, they typically did not have environmental sustainability goals at the top, at the abstract levels within their goal hierarchy. So what this meant was, when they were doing their sustainability task, it was very much like, we are this business, this is who we are, but we need to do a sustainability. So it was an add-on, a kind of afterthought. So these organisations were basically doing things at the very task, the very concrete level at the bottom of the goal hierarchy. Now, don't get me wrong, it's great that they were doing things, but what we're saying is this is only part of the solution to doing this, to have these goals at this bottom level in the hierarchy. So because they had these at the lower level, it was all about implementation. So this is how we do environmental sustainability, by implementing things at the task level. And because it was that task focus, obviously it ended up being a technology type focus. So it was solutions like, let's look at machine efficiency. If we can monitor that, if we can measure it, we can work on how to be more productive, but we can also work on how, if we can do things to bring the energy use down, if we can make it more efficient. There's a lot of talk about things like carbon calculators. So all of these things are very good and obviously very helpful, but there was very little connection in to, instead of thinking about how to now design sustainability into the process at this bottom level, how to actually redesign the whole design so that sustainability goals could be linked to things at their higher levels, like things like quality, value, customer, markets. Now, it doesn't mean that environmental sustainability needs to be the true who you are, your vision. It doesn't have to be the main thing at that top level. But if there's something at that top level that you're trying to achieve, like quality or value, and the environmental goal can be a mechanism for you achieving that, then that gives you a why. It gives you a purpose of why you're doing sustainability, rather than just seeing it as this add-on thing that's kind of designed in afterwards. So that's basically the two major patterns that we found so we found these two major patterns at the end of the project, and the idea was that now we've got this, can we do an intervention to work on ways that these places where the goals could be better connected actually could be worked on? So can we brainstorm with organisations, can we work with them, and then can we intervene and measure the effectiveness of these changes? Now, the second type of organisation was very different. They had environmental sustainability right up at the top. We could see lots of connections really up from the top all the way down. There was loads of connections everywhere. So that meant there was always a lot of reason, there was a lot of justification, there was always a clear why they were doing environmental sustainability, other than from a we need to add it in because we've been told. It was more true to their purpose. So this is basically the main difference. Now, I think standing back from it, it's not, I guess, that surprising that you could see that some have it built in from the top and other organisations don't have it built in from the top. But where I think things get more interesting and where this tool can be useful going forwards is that at the moment, these manufacturing organisations that have it really built in from the top, it's part of their vision. They want to be, it's all about environmental sustainability. That's giving them a competitive advantage, you know, currently. However, if more organisations in their market start to move in the same steps going forward, actually that USP could actually become diluted. So their kind of answer to helping connect this would actually shift. So just because a goal hierarchy is working right now doesn't mean it's going to continue to work for you going forwards. So if I just finish with some of the take-home messages, what we're trying to do with the goal hierarchy is to strategically make people aware of what is going on within the organisation. So where is environmental sustainability goals coming from? Are they add-on things at this bottom level, or are they actually part of an organisation's vision? Now, within psychology, what we know is that if something is part of your vision, if it's at this high abstract level, it's like linked to our identity, our values, whatever they are, can really motivate and can really drive what actually happens on the ground or this bottom level in this concrete way. So if these environmental tasks are all at the bottom level and they're not well connected to the top level, then based on psychology, there is kind of not a great motivation for ensuring that those things actually happen. We don't have a reason as such for continuing to do them. And actually that we think that the same would apply in this organisational setting, that if they're not specified up there at the top, then resources could start to be limited to come down to actually make sure those tasks happen. So they might be happening now, but it doesn't mean they'll continue to happen. And what we're saying is that there's no easy solution to be both proactive and sustainable, but it's got to be about really stripping everything back and looking at exactly what you're doing and what the connections are. And the solutions are going to be different for different organisations. So, for example, we know that these organisations that are currently doing it well, they're also getting a USP from it, but that could change as things go forwards. This was just how, I'm just going to give you a high level just in the last 30 seconds about how the tool can then be used to help give some creative thought. So what we do is we look at, is there a way of creating environmental things connected in with the high level goals? So it doesn't need to be, we are an environmentally sustainable, or, you know, we're trying to be just an environmental savvy organisation. It could be something else, but the environmental goals are a way of achieving that. What we found in one case study was that they had a really interesting way at looking at productivity and manufacturing. So they used a high reliability approach, for example. But all of that good thinking wasn't even used as part of the sustainability work. So there was things that they had for working in this kind of normal way of seeing things that could actually be really helpful for them to see the environmental goals, but actually they don't use them in relation to the environmental goals because they're just seen as these add-on things. It's, we get the technology in and we monitor efficiency use. And then the final point, and again bringing it back to the implications of why people are going to be really key for making changes here, we really want to start thinking about organisations having strategic kind of priority planning, teams that actually have environmental sustainability at the forefront when strategic planning is done. And I think something really cool will be, now we here at the business school, that students year on year are getting more interested, more concerned about the environment. So I think there's really interesting scopes for kind of graduate schemes and apprenticeship schemes for kind of new ways of thinking coming from these new youngsters about how we can maybe work on the areas of the goal hierarchy that are not very well connected or where there's big gaps. So that's it.
Great, well, thank you, Rebecca. That was really, really interesting. I've certainly thought of a few questions for you, which I'll hold to the end. So I'd like to introduce our next speaker now, and that is Katie Davis. Katie's Managing Director of Camden Boss. and based in Mildenhall, and she has a background of working with privately owned businesses for Deloitte, and she joined Camden Boss just after the lockdown was announced in 2020, an interesting time to be starting in a new business. She spent the majority of the last year restructuring and relocating the business while focusing on driving the people strategy. And her presentation today will give insight into the adaptations and learning points during the pandemic, including leading a majority workforce that couldn't work from home. Over to you, Katie. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Fiona, and thank you so much for the opportunity to come and speak to you all this morning. I guess my first point is I really wish I'd met Rebecca about 18 months ago to talk about a period of competing priorities and complex interdependencies. Let me just share my screen and bear with me for 1 second. Hopefully you can see that. And I'll put onto presentation. There we go. So over the next 15 minutes, I'll give you a brief overview of me, who we are at Camden Boss, a bit of context, and just take you through a bit of our journey over the last 18 months through this slightly crazy time. I'm trying to keep it quite brief and light-hearted. I'm very honest. So again, I'm not professing that to sit here today and tell you that we've got everything right, but it's been a massive period of learning for me and for the organisations. It has been for so many people across all industries in the UK and the world. And I would love to hear questions or talk to people more outside of this call if they've got things to share or want to pick my brain on some of the bits that we learned. Fabulous. So just to introduce you very briefly and give you a bit of context, who are we? So as Fiona very kindly said, yeah, we are Camden Boss, we're a manufacturing company. We currently employ 105 people. My great and quite interesting fact, which makes us a little bit unusual for manufacturers, particularly in the East, is that we are currently running at 52% female, so our gender balance is quite interesting. We turn over about £10 million and we have been family owned since 2007. So I think that kind of sets out the importance of people within our business and our people strategy. We're based in Mildenhall and we also have an outpost over in Hong Kong. So what is it exactly that we do? We design and manufacture components and connectors and injection molded standard enclosures, largely for the electronics industry. So they tend to house kind of sensor technology and things associated with the Internet of Things predominantly at the moment, against serving all industries. So again, for us over the last 12 months, it's been a real revolution that we've seen amongst our customer base as they also cope with the pandemic. We also have an element of the business that deals with custom plastic fabricated enclosures, so that's made out of flat sheet plastic, so quite interesting products that we're making again for a wide range of customers. So in pulling together this the content for this session, I can't help but phrase the first part of this as well. That was interesting. Interesting being one of my most favourite words in the English language, because it can mean absolutely anything, can't it? So as Fiona very kindly said, yeah, I joined Camden Boss as Managing Director on the 29th of March last year, which for those of you that remember the calendar particularly well at that point, was 1 week after Boris announced a full lockdown. So definitely an interesting time to take on a new challenge, and particularly joining a business with a pretty lofty goal of doing some pretty rapid and quite wide-ranging change when all bets were suddenly off. So from a personal standpoint, it was quite a vertical learning curve, getting to know a new business when it had effectively been completely fragmented. So there's a bit of extra context behind the story there. So I guess in terms of key learnings and things that we saw right at the start of that pandemic, I imagine my journey is very similar to most people. To me, my go-to in a period where my workforce is facing challenge, and my key kind of leadership go-to is visible leadership. I will get in amongst my people, engaging with them all personally as much as possible, which kind of got challenged when your fundamental leadership kind of tenet gets challenged by a pandemic. That means you can't go and be with people. It was incredibly hard. So at that point, my business was based across 2 sites. So we had fragmented our workforce to kind of keep bubbles, as it were, and that served us pretty well. But again, it made that leadership challenge even more difficult. So, okay, how do we approach this differently? How do we try to make sure that the workforce are settled and can are experiencing real leadership from us, us directors, and particularly me as MD, without physically being there? So it was a definite challenge that we faced. Linked to that was communication across a split workforce. So again, we were physically manufacturing staff, which represent about 60% of my business. They were split across 2 sites. Great from a COVID measures standpoint and being able to put people into bubbles. We also had people working from home. it made that communication piece really challenging, even down to simple things. So I think, as with a lot of people, we investigated new media. We never before has it come down to kind of simple leadership tasks of regularly engaging via different methods with your teams and making sure that all questions were answered, people were getting, you know, repeated and consistent communication. So again, back to basics. It was an interesting time, I think, as we all saw over the course of last year with reactions and people's reactions. It definitely felt like EQ overload, as I put down there. Seeing the many and varied reactions that we had first to the initial lockdown, you know, people that were panicking, people that were really concerned about loved ones or themselves with their own health conditions, etc. People concerned about staying in work because they knew they needed to continue to earn money. What did furlough mean? What was this new scheme? Us as leaders trying to answer those questions when the government was still kind of creating the background detail. It was such an enormous challenge for all of us to deal with that kind of EQ managing with our workforce. And I think as a consequence of that, to me, it felt like it signalled a bit of a new era for wellbeing. Personally, I really hate the term. It kind of sounds a bit spa-like to me. It sounds a bit kind of, you know, massage and sort of, you know, sitting by a pool and relaxing, when actually what we're talking about here is something really very fundamental to our employees and our workforces. It's about their ability to work knowing that they are being looked after, and that you as an employer are looking after them. And it feels like, certainly from my standpoint, the old version of wellbeing, which was very much kind of, you know, fruit baskets and kind of temporary measures, has been really challenged and kind of permanently fractured as a consequence of the pandemic, as we're all talking about it as a standard offering now and really thinking about what that means for our workforces. I think we also, as a side effect of that, we saw, certainly within our workforce, a real cracking open of the lid of mental health, as a lot of people did. We had a lot of people that were challenged about it, but the really interesting thing for me was that people suddenly started to feel way more comfortable talking about it. And that is something that we've absolutely tried to kind of embrace and continue here, is that it's okay to talk about it, because it has been a massive struggle for everybody. You know, you are very normal to be struggling with this. So it feels like a very refreshing, challenging new era for wellbeing. And also looking at my workforce's coping mechanisms, I think it was a fascinating period for all of us, seeing how people coped and adapted. But again, talking about my workforce being split across two sites, you could very quickly see my production staff, who were in every day, kind of controlling the bits that they could control. So in a world that's gone into complete kind of chaos and all bets were off, actually they got very comfortable very quickly with knowing who was working around them, who was in their immediate area. Their workstations were all set out, you know, and they were involved in doing that and making sure that they had a good distance, you know, calling each other out on hand washing, wiping down workstations. You know, if people forgot to wear a mask, they'd be on it. And just seeing them mentally log, you know, right, around me I've got, you know, Joe blogs, etc., etc. I know that they live with these people, you know, this is what their family get up to at the weekends. I know that they're going to the supermarket. They could control their own environment and the influences on that, which was really, really fascinating. So again, seeing people keep those kind of basic securities when the world was a bit crazy. So it did get overwhelming, as with most people. I think we all found it quite challenging at times. And at times, certainly from my own standpoint, I did have moments of going, hang on, I'm overthinking this. Let's just keep it simple. It is all down to leadership. And yes, your leadership styles are being challenged and the world is being challenged. But actually, for all that his faults, and I know that he is a controversial character and he's not necessarily perfect, but we all learn about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Hang on, I think he was probably onto something. So then we were faced with a period of the return to work, or in my case, the return to work, we've not really been anywhere. So how do we deal with that? What I found from my own journey is that we were faced with massive fragmentation. So I'd be speaking to kind of, you know, uni mates, school mates, former colleagues who were very surprised that I was going into work every day. But my view was, I can do that and I can be socially distanced from my workforce, but my workforce are in and I'm in a new role here, a new leadership position. It's my choice and it's what works for me and for my business. But it made me realise that the UK had really forgotten about the fact that we still make things, and you can't really make things from home often. So there's a bit of a national fragmentation at a macro level that was going on. And a lot of my workforce started to feel a little bit left behind in the kind of national discourse about this return to work and this new way of working, when actually their world hadn't really changed. Also on a micro level, the obvious stuff of having, you know, my office-based, you know, support functions coming back to work. the natural opportunity for more fragmentation when you've got a split workforce anyway that are split between production and office. Being faced with the asymmetry of flexibility, again, we've tried to offer hybrid working to our functional staff, but obviously we are quite limited in terms of what flexibility we can afford to our warehouse and production staff who need to be in the workplace all day, every day. And again, building on from what I just said about the coping mechanisms, what was really fascinating to me in that return to work question was that actually it's very easy to forget about your fixed workforce, your production, your warehouse workforce, because their world isn't changing, but actually change is being done to them. So to them, it was almost like the old saying of stranger danger. They don't know what the finance guys and girls have been up to and what they do every day. They've created a nice little comfort bubble for themselves, and they feel quite safe in that. So actually, their safety bubble was being pierced by us bringing people back into the workforce. So again, definitely found myself overcomplicating things, or at risk of overcomplicating things, when actually the answers definitely sat in going back to basics and going back to leadership fundamentals, being authentic with your workforce and being a bit vulnerable and asking them what their views are, because their world is also impacted and they know the answers. Who did they miss? Who did it really not work with? Not having them on site. Was it finance? Did they find it really difficult to deal with like quality issues if parts of the quality team weren't here? So we did a massive period of engagement to really ask those questions and make sure that all of the workforce, even those people whose day-to-day life wasn't being impacted by the return to work, had the ability to speak up. We also had a lot of people whose reaction was, well, we should all be in because production and the warehouse are in. I say here, give the workforce credit. Actually they found that, my staff found that really patronising. They know that finance don't necessarily have to be on site to do their job all of the time. They are, give them credit for actually being pretty sensible. Equally, they don't necessarily want everybody here, even now with the government guidelines relaxing. They don't necessarily want everybody here all day, every day, because there is still a risk around. So definitely going back to basics and being, that authentic leadership and giving the workforce credit for their own opinions. For us, flexibility has alternatives. So actually, what do our workforce want? So if you've got office-based staff, yeah, they might want actual day flexibility. Production and warehouse staff, what do they want? To them, flexibility maybe that's not, that important to them, but actually they want, what we're finding is a sense of kind of investment in them and support for them. The fact that we really care about them and that we're consulting with them and asking their needs. It hasn't really impacted us thus far that we can't offer them the same flexibility or the ability to work from home or those things that we can offer to our office-based staff. The other bit that I realised, I was very lucky earlier this year, probably in July time, to host a roundtable talking about exactly this question of the return to work for those who haven't been away. What became quickly apparent is that every single business's circumstances, culture, and situation were completely different. So I know it was a phrase that you got used a lot during the pandemic, but it really was you do you. What is right for you? Have courage of your convictions in that and really go for it, because you know your staff, you know your own situation, and rely on your own basic leadership. So don't overcomplicate it. You do you and you own that. And again, you go back to the basics of Maslow. Like I said, he's got his faults, but actually, do your workforce fundamentally feel safe? Do they feel like they're being protected? Do they feel like they're looked after? Is their leader treating them like an individual and making sure that their own situation is being catered for? That absolutely rang through for me as a key learning. So at risk of hitting the time limit, for me and my overall takeaway, it all comes down to engagement. All of this comes down to engagement. And it sounds very altruistic as an MD of a manufacturing company, but actually I'm really selfish. Engagement equals productivity. I want my staff to be fully engaged in what we're doing. And at the end of the day, that makes us work better as a business. So, all of these are things that people are really, very familiar with as key tenets of people strategy and having a strong people strategy. So again, I was very lucky to chair a roundtable yesterday through Name and Make UK, looking at exactly the strengths of people strategy in this current environment. It all comes down to, as Rebecca, echoing loads of things that Rebecca's just covered really helpfully. Purpose and values. Are people invested in why we're here and what we're doing? Wellbeing. Are we really looking after our workforce in a meaningful way? What does that mean to them? Is it giving them support if they need access to social housing because they've been kicked out of home? Or is it getting them support to counselling because actually they're having a really terrible time in terms of their own mental health? Helen has a wonderful phrase, the Spangle Trap, which she introduced me to in the build up to this. It isn't around, yoga and fruit baskets. That is probably very meaningful well-being when all of your other well-being boxes are ticked. But actually, what is meaningful to your staff on an individual basis in terms of their own circumstances? Diversity and inclusion, do they feel like they can be themselves at work? Is this a safe place for them to be? Talent attraction, development, retention, community engagement, responsibility, conservation, sustainability, all of these things. I think it feels to me, and our learning here is that both our sense of responsibility as leaders, plus also the demands from my workforce have increased. What are we doing about our sustainability? What are we doing to support the local community and invest in our young talent pathways in local schools? We're getting a very much more invested and challenging workforce coming on the back of it, because again, it feels like all bets have been off. And again, it comes down to communication and genuine engagement. So I'm very conscious that is just my view of the world. So just as a final part, as a lovely story, Katie, so what? Why do we care? Well, firstly, you will care because you're here listening to a masterclass around people, productivity and well-being. So you obviously care about your people. But I think at the moment, we are in a period where we, as manufacturers particularly, we are in a ridiculously competitive labour landscape. We can all see it coming across all functions. From a personal observation standpoint, I still get people say to me, oh, you're in manufacturing, as if to say, oh, could you not do better? Manufacturing has got a terrible stigma in this country, and it's down to all of us as leaders in the manufacturing industry to really try and challenge that PR. We do look after our people. It's not 1975, and our method of dealing with people is to take them out by the skip and give them a stern talking to. We can be modern people, businesses and manufacturers at the same time. So I hope that has been a useful trot through of some of our learnings from my small corner of the world, and I'd be absolutely delighted to take questions or hear more from other people later. Thank you, Fiona.
Brilliant, thank you, Katie. It's really interesting to hear your personal journey and perspective over the last 18 months or so. So there are some questions popping into the chat, so our speakers might want to just have a look at some of those, and then we'll come to those after our next speaker, which is Carl Haycock. So Carl is the UK Printer Operations Director for Domino Printing, and he's based headquartered in Cambridge. He has responsibility across the group for manufacturing excellence and health and safety. So his presentation will draw on 35 years in manufacturing and 6 Sigma Black Belt, as he discusses how lean and continuous improvement processes can be used to drive forwards manufacturing and achieve changes that support well-being and performance. Carl.
Thank you for that introduction. I'm delighted to be able to talk to you about how Domino Printing Sciences has used lean to drive our business performance, and how people engagement is really an integral part of that. Hopefully everybody can see the screen and that's moving on okay. Just a little bit about Domino first of all. I'm proud to say we grew from a Cambridge University spin out all those years ago to a multinational company today, and about 800 of our people are based in the UK. Most of them are at Bar Hill near Cambridge, where we do printer manufacturing, and the rest at our ink manufacturing plants in Liverpool. But you can see there we were acquired just a few years ago by Brother, which was a wanted investment to allow us to get scale. So what do we do? Well, if you've been into a supermarket, which I'm sure everybody has, then you will undoubtedly have touched our products. We mark best before dates, traceability codes, variable information onto products such as food, beverage, pharmaceutical, as well as another range of industrial products as well. But more recently, we've gone into the digital space of producing high quality digital labels, and we've taken a market leading position in that area, where we can produce labels that are different and customized for every single label, which is different to the traditional market of having to produce hundreds of thousands or millions of labels just to be economical. So that's the kind of two strands to our business. What I'd like to do now is just show you a 60-second video of the Cambridge factory, and then we can touch back on some of the features within that relate to lean and people.
Factory assembly processes utilise the latest technology for providing ergonomic conditions for our operators. Design for manufacture is built into the product creation process, while comprehensive test systems create a no-fault forward approach.
One thing that we share with our customers is that we are manufacturers compelled to achieve best practice to bring competitive advantage. The operations team are heavily engaged in a continuous improvement programme, with the majority of our people trained in business improvement techniques or Six Sigma.
Okay, apologies for the abruptness of the end there to get it into 60 seconds, but what do we mean by lean in Domino? Well, what lean is for us, it's about eliminating waste and really having a culture where everybody's driven to do their best and to continually improve everything that we do. And to do that, you've got to have real employee engagement. You know, it's not for us about eliminating all the inventory in the process, which a lot of people talk about. Sure, that's one of the concepts of lean. It's not about taking the automotive approach of having just-in-time material supply. And for certain, and I hear this a number of times, which always makes me worry, people say we're in business survival mode and we need to undertake a lean program to get more productive so that we can keep the business going. Yes, you will get productivity with lean and people engagements, but you're not going to engage people if you start off with that as your reason for having a program. And just to touch on the 8 wastes of lean, some people might not realize that actually one of those 8 wastes is non-utilized talent. So very much we're into making sure that we do utilize people's talents and we help develop that skills and knowledge. Has that been successful for Domino? Absolutely. So over the last 5 years that we've really taken on board this approach, we've driven our key customer KPIs in the right direction so that printers are delivered in faster lead times, which helps us secure more orders and more reliably for the customer's install. And as a consequence, we've seen a lot lower levels of complaints. But for the business as well, you know, a little bit like what Katie said, you know, we're not doing this to make it a nice place just for our operators. It also makes us more efficient and more productive. And the manufacturing area has seen fantastic improvements in our productivity, where we've been able to develop more products and produce more products with the same people and deploy people to other areas. And our warehouse areas, which are lagging behind a little bit the manufacturing areas in terms of the projects that are going on, that's a big area of focus now, and I'm sure that we'll see the same productivity come through there, which is important for UK manufacturing. But you can also see the results in our people. We are in a very competitive space for talent attraction and talent retention, and you can see there that our staff turnover has reduced month on month, and literally nobody is leaving the Domino manufacturing operation because they're so well engaged in what we're doing, and we provide the environment that helps them enjoy their day at work. So very you know, selfish reasons for doing it, as well as it being a great thing for people to be involved in their daily work life. So that's all very well. How have we done that? What's been the kind of process and journey that we've undertaken to achieve this? It's a simple lean tool, but we've used the 3 Ps. There are variations of this. This is the one we've used, and we really used one of our product developments. So the AX series printer that you saw in the video there, we really planned ahead so that we could articulate what we needed from the process and how we needed our people to behave. And this was, you know, a number of years ahead of the product launch. So the launch was not just a product development, it was a whole business program to really drive a new level of performance. So we'll just touch on some of the process aspects first that we saw from the video, and then we'll take a bit more of a look at the people cornerstone. So as you saw in the video, I mean, obviously you can see that everybody's got company branded workwear. Hopefully you saw that it's a really highly visual workplace. I'm a really strong believer that you can't ask people to deliver high quality if they're working in a dark, dirty, cold factory. And nobody feels good about produced scrap, do they? And defects. You know, as you heard from Naomi there, Operators can see at every stage they are making the right quality of product, rather than discovering at the very end of the process that it fails and needs rework, which is how it used to be in the old world, where a printer would get to the final stage, it would delay a customer order, and we'd need a technician to really come and sort that printer out. Now we have a no fault forward approach, which makes it more satisfying for the operators. On the flow line there in the picture on the right, you can see we've got single workpiece flow, as you'd expect with a lean operation. But also, hopefully you notice that the workstations are all adjustable for each operator, so they can raise in height, they can tilt, and that really helps us look after the operator's ergonomics and shows to them that ergonomics is important to us. We go a step further than that, and I don't want to sound like a salesman for Backtrack, but we also allow our operators to, we encourage our operators to wear a Backtrack device, and they all wear this at least once per year, so that we can review the process that they're working in. And what that does is it gives us data on their ergonomic movements. So if you can see in the top graph there, we can see a number of activations where the operator's been carrying out non-preferred ergonomic movements. So that might be stooping, twisting, bending, and those are things that we want to improve. So we can then redesign the process, and you can see there in the second half of the picture, you know, we've introduced a pallet lift or a new design pallet, and we've really improved the ergonomic position for that operator. So that helps us keep people at work, keep them healthy, and show that we are looking after them. They are important to us. Okay, so let's go back more to the real kind of people side of things, the behaviour side of things. How many people like conflict in their daily job? Not many people, and if you are one of those people, then I'd suggest you probably ought to find a different career. But you know, often through different priorities, aims, objectives, then we get into conflict. And what we're trying to do here is, you know, we talk about rowing in the same direction, being on the same page. Actually, we're trying to make sure that all of our people are aligned. So what we've done at Domino is we've focused much more on the why. We've created the Domino framework. What's our purpose? And then our vision of what we will achieve and how it will be deployed. And each person's objectives, no matter where you're working in the company around the world, are linked to the 5 strategic themes that you can see there. And the bottom one is that we will continue to make Domino a great place to work. So everybody's got objectives that align to those strategic themes, and they are reviewed at a very structured level 1 to 5 series of meetings that go from a kind of daily starter shift meeting through to quarterly business reviews. So hopefully everybody feels that what they're doing is important, and they understand how that contributes to the business's overall ethos and purpose. But you know, generally as human beings, I think we all feel better when we know how we're doing, either as a person or as a department or as a business. We don't like to be left in the dark, and it's no different for our workforce. So as well as being aligned on what we're trying to achieve, through the level 1 to 5 meetings, they'll have regular reviews of the KPIs that clearly point to how we're doing at those different levels. And you know, on the left side, that picture's taken, it's in the centre of our factory floor. We've moved more recently now to a digital display so that we can make sure that we've got that inclusion and we're not excluding all of the people working from home. So the same review happens now, but it's online. And the other advantage that we get from that is that it's live data, and we can drill into that data to get root causes very quickly. So people know what they're doing and how they're doing. But if we're really going to have high performing teams, we need everybody participating and able to raise ideas and encouraged to raise and solve problems. So what we've done is we've introduced an e-card system. It started out as a manual paper-based T-card system, but now everybody can use their mobile phone or their workstation, just scan the code, and they can enter an idea or a problem into the level 1 to 5 system. And importantly, they can see where that idea is in the process, and they have to approve it before it can be closed. That idea, it might just be a quick win that can be solved by one person and reviewed just at the level 1 meeting, or it might progress through the different levels and need a multifunctional team assigned to it. But everybody's participating, everybody's encouraged, and it's part of their objectives to suggest ideas and issues. But if we're going to have people suggesting ideas and solving problems, then we need to have high performing teams that are able to deliver them. So in tandem, we've spent a lot of time educating our people. You heard there Cassie talking about how all of our people are trained to deliver a business improvement. It started out as NVQ training, and then it's now moved more onto e-learning, where we're using Lean Six Sigma training. So that, and it's a formal accredited program. So there is something in it for the operator and their career, not just the business. And rather than just being operators that assemble printers, they're now people that have qualifications, and they have the ability and the projects to work on cross-functional improvement projects. This is more now the behaviour that we celebrate, and the people that we want, rather than expert technicians that can make a printer work at the end of the process. So I guess everybody on the call can probably think of a number of initiatives that have gone through in their company over the years, and they fell apart. Yeah, we used to do that for a while, but I don't know why, but we stopped it. We did that. You know, and Lean's no different. You really have to pay attention to it on a continual basis to make sure that it continues to be successful. And we do that in a few different ways, but one of them obviously is keeping it in people's faces all the time, celebrating success so that people can see that it is a good thing to do. We have regular award sessions from monthly to quarterly awards for the most suggestions, the best workplace organised area, most health and safety good spots, best projects, all of those kind of things. And they just get small tokens of esteem and celebration photographs, or it might be a company barbecue, that kind of thing. So keeping those successes regular and relevant and visible is really important. And the other aspect is making sure that, as the management team, is that we're asking the right questions, and we have structured Gemba walks. So for those that don't know what we mean by Gemba, it's effectively a Japanese lean term. It means getting to the source of the truth. And you can read all the reports that you like, and certainly I read some reports. You can sit in your office and read emails, but you won't find out anything like what is really happening unless you get out and talk to the people that are on the shop floor and that are close to the issues. And so we have a structured approach of doing that, and asking them what projects they're working on, what ideas they can see, and what are the issues that are stopping them being the absolute best they can. So keeping that regularity of things is really important. The good thing about being successful, as we have been, is that it's a virtual cycle, because we've been able to introduce and continually adopt our benefits to help retain employees and make it a great place to work. Similar to Katie, you know, a lot more has been introduced in the wellbeing space. I agree with Katie. That term doesn't resonate for me, but we've done lots of mindfulness sessions. We've trained coaches, free massages, and headspace membership, as well as all the other kind of benefits like holiday buy, cycle to work scheme, and flexible working that we've had in place for some years. We survey our employees regularly as well to find out what we can do to improve further and make it an even better place to work. And I'm glad to say that in that survey, 98% felt that we really cared about their health and well-being. My final slide now. We have won a lot of awards at the Cambridge factory, I'm glad to say. We're not perfect, it's a continual journey, but it's a small factory. But in terms of the pounds per square foot that we generate through that factory, then it's pretty impressive. And I'm glad to say that it shows the best kind of processes and systems and visual management that you would see in some of the top performing automotive companies. And I know that I've worked in automotive, and I've had the benefit of seeing these companies, and we've really kind of stolen with pride. So that also, you know, as well as learning from the judges and other companies in those awards, it gives us a real great opportunity to celebrate success with our employees through company barbecues and recognition events around these awards. And people feel good because, you know, it's been externally recognised that they're working for a company that that is recognised by others as a good place to work. So very finally, because I could talk about this all day, but I'm running out of time. You know, if I had to give you some tips from what we've learned, focus. It's simple concept, but simple works well in my experience in operations. Assess and address all your 3 Ps. Many companies do a product launch, introduce a process. They don't really think about all of the different aspects in product, process, and people that they could do to make it the maximum business performance. Best before dates, sorry, before photographs and after photographs of areas that you've improved, and the benefits always work well when you're starting off. And if you in tandem start the education exercise and get some key people that are interested in it through that program, you'll start to find that the ideas come thick and fast, and very soon you'll be having to prioritize what you do. For us, it was important that we really kind of made a signal that things are not the same anymore, that there is change here. And we did that by spending money on the factory and making it highly visible, good lighting, good flooring and branding, as well as the workwear that just started to get that process in place, that things are not the same anymore. And then, of course, rewarding and celebrating those new behaviours on a regular basis. Change management always requires some conflict management. Personally, I always find that if you focus on what it means for the customer, most people, it resonates for most people that that's the person that pays the bills, and that tends to drive people's motivation, I find. Sorry, that was just a very quick overview of many years of work at Domino. Hopefully some of you will have the opportunity to see our factory. It is something that we do as tours in the normal world when we're not in a pandemic, and I hope it was of use to you in that presentation. Thank you for listening.
Okay, great. Thank you, Carl. It was really, really interesting and nice to see through the presentations, lots of tools and techniques and different ideas that we can take away to look at productivity and well-being in different workspaces. So I'd like to now invite our other speakers to come back on camera, Katie and Rebecca. And we've got Helen back as well. So I think Helen's going to, so we've now got about 15 minutes or so for questions and answers. And I think there's been some quite lively discussion going on in the chat as well. So I'm going to pass over to Helen to start fielding a few questions. But I think also if you wanted to come on microphone, you could raise your hand and come on microphone. Is that right, Helen?
I will check with Claire, but I think it's probably just text-based at the moment. So we either in the Q&A or in the chat, yeah, because we've got a webinar format.
Okay, so if you've got a question, please do quickly type it into the chat and we'll try and get through as many as we can. Okay, so I'll pass to Helen to kick us off.
Yes, thank you so much to all our speakers. I've collected together a few questions. I hope that people won't mind, but I've collected them together in such a way that hopefully all our panelists can respond to them in turn. Because I think they've all got interesting perspectives to give on these things. So the first one was, there was a lively chat in the chat about best practices in terms of giving employees credit, hearing from employees, and then it moved on to measuring employee engagement. And I think both Katie, Carl and Becky have different perspectives to give on this. So could I start with a brief run around between Katie, Carl and then Becky on getting that understanding of how engagement is going in your firm?
Yeah, do you want me to kick off?
Katie first, yeah.
Yeah, shut me up. Yeah, so we are absolutely, as I said, we are not a template for best practice for everybody. We are literally at the start of our people journey, and we are still learning. So it is very particular to us and what we found. So we've just done our first full engagement survey. So it's been a real benchmark for us. Really interesting time to do it, and we moved site on the 1st of June as well. So it's literally just a complete kind of baseline that we've just done. So we use a company called Best Employers, well, or an initiative called Best Employers. It's been really good actually, and has given us a really good set of data that we can start to go on. So from actually physically measuring employee engagement, we're right at the start. We intend on the back of that to, we've identified kind of 4 key areas where we need to do some work, and we've got some work streams going on, and we'll survey those through just kind of regular survey monkey type things, just very light things to just check how we're doing and whether what we're doing is resonating. From giving people credit and that sort of thing, I guess where I was coming from in what I was talking about earlier was actually just listening, just evidencing that you're listening to their opinions. What we found, because we haven't been particularly strong as a company on employee engagement in the past, perhaps just physically asking people, having the MD ask them, their views was kind of quite just nice, really. I think they just quite liked the fact that they had the ability to opine on something that they didn't really think was their business. So again, I'm talking about kind of the return to work and actually engaging with the warehouse and production guys and girls. You know, their world was being impacted by it, and it was. I'm really lucky. So I've got to mention them, but we've done some brilliant work with Marshall Centre and particularly Joe Boyd, who has been an absolute great counsellor on all these things to me, and has reminded me often to just keep it simple. And that was exactly it. You know, their world is being changed. They do actually need to be listened to as part of that. They might not have a dissenting view, if they might completely agree with what you're doing, but at least they've been consulted because change is being done to them and around them. So it's just giving it really, you know, from my standpoint, it's very, very basic stuff, but just making them feel like their view is actually being heard. And even if you don't go with their view, they can understand your reasons why.
Yeah.
And that they had the chance to say or to not opine, and then they can't moan. They still will, but they can't.
Wonderful. Carl, do you have anything to add to that?
Absolutely, yeah. We measure employee satisfaction on a quarterly basis. Very simply, we use ENPS. So we use NPS scores, Net Promoter Scores, for our customers, and we use employee NPS for our employees. It's very simple, deliberately so. You basically, everybody is reminding and encouraged to fill it out once a quarter, but it is literally a 1 to 10 score, indicating your level of satisfaction, and then just an open comments box for people to put comments in. So we can very quickly see, it gives us a net promoter score then, whether people are promoters or detractors for the business from the scores. And the important thing though, similar to Katie, is following up then. You know, we have working groups then that follow up with the results of the survey and the comments to try and understand what we can do and feedback on what we're doing to improve that. That's one level of engagement. The other thing I do very simply, every single month, we invite all of the people that have got a birthday in that month to an informal get together, and we have some very good cake from our restaurant. And I just chat with them about what's going on in the business and understand, you know, what's important for them. And I get some really good feedback from that again, you wouldn't get from any other source. It's not really helping my waistline, I have to say, but get some really good feedback from it.
That's fantastic, thank you. So it's definitely on the lines of really being interested, but actually keeping it fairly simple. Do you have something to add to that, Becky?
So obviously, being in academia, they are, you know, it's a bit different. I can't speak about dealing with one specific organisation, but Carl just raised something that I did want to mention. So our kind of take on it when companies have asked us about engagement will be things like, I'll come in and I'll say, stop paying consultancies to do these surveys with you that measure a very specific thing. We have, for example, dissertation and Kevin's research centre obviously as well will have the same. We have research students every year that come in and want to do dissertations, and actually putting together a survey on what's going on with people's engagement or well-being is, you know, something that they really want to do, and then they can run it, they can analyze it for you. So that's kind of our take on it, that there's lots of resource kind of at the fingertips that I don't think is always, you know, kind of used that well, or we don't kind of give that message that well to organizations. But the last one that we did, so when I did this one with the local council, this was part of a dissertation project. Had like 3 dissertation students working together, and we didn't just measure engagement. We wanted to, it was more like a general health thing for employees, but in terms of everything like satisfaction, well-being, are you coping, you know? So we would go a bit broader, because then you can understand the relationships between things. So if people come out, so if you do a classic engagement survey and it says they're not very engaged, it doesn't tell you, but it doesn't start to build the picture of, well, why might they not be engaged? So that's kind of, so actually we kind of go a bit more complex, but I guess for good reason. And the second thing that happened when we did this engagement survey was there was lots of, so we did the classic adding in the open comment boxes, and there was lots of things that came up that were very repetitive. So we saw it a lot from a lot of people, and they weren't necessarily the best behaviours that were being mentioned. And when this was fed back, there was a very kind of risk averse thing of, oh, but our organisation isn't like that, we'll just keep those over there. Or employees were frustrated because they'd be given this opportunity to do the survey, but there would be never any initiatives off the back of it, which you can see is obviously very different to what Carl and Katie are doing. But I think there's no point asking them if you definitely don't have the resources to then do something with the data you get. So yeah, that's my take.
That's lovely, thank you. I thought there was quite an interesting question in the chat, which was around thoughts on a 4-day working week and its implications for manufacturing, because lots of this has been talked about in all sorts of areas recently. So yes, I'd love to go around. We'll start with Carl this time.
Sorry, it helps if I unmute, doesn't it? Sorry, I got a bit of interference there. The research.
So someone was asking for the panel's thoughts on the 4-day working week proposals in various circles and the implications you think this would have for manufacturing.
Yeah. We have a flexible working system at Domino where we can have people working an extra 2 hours a day with adequate notice, and then they're able to have days off at times where we're less busy. So that gives them, you know, hopefully we can plan it on a Friday and a nice sunny day and people get a whole day off. So that gives a lot of benefit for people, but also, you know, good for the business in terms of keeping lead times down, which is important to us. We have got a shift that works Monday to Thursday only because that's their preference. But we've also got a shift that works across the 5 days because some people also want to work across 5 days and not work longer Monday to Thursday days. We need to keep working the 5 days with some level of crew because otherwise our lead times go out. And we're making customized printers in around about 5 days. So if we don't work for one of those weekdays, it extends our lead time. So it's keeping a balance on that. But I think gradually over the last few years, that the factory is very, very quiet on a Friday afternoon. At least now we've moved most people to finishing early on a Friday. So it's definitely moving in that direction. I'd love to work a 4-day week in the future. Our customers, unfortunately, still want products on very short lead times.
Great, thank you. Katie, do you have any perspectives to add?
Yeah, really similar observations to Carl, actually. So we moved site and bought both of our, so we were previously split across 2 sites, but brought both sites together. And at that point, aligned everybody's working hours, and that meant that we now finish at 1 o'clock on a Friday, which is great when it's sunny, as Carl rightly said. So yeah, it's very quiet here on a Friday anyway. But you're absolutely right. Again, to me, we've got people that would rather, if they were going to do a 4-day week type mechanism, they might actually prefer to do those 4 days worth of hours of split across 5 because they might have childcare issues, they might have there might be a carer or whatever. Yeah, and we have the constant pressure of customer lead times and trying to reduce the lead times of what we're doing. I mean, yeah, it's a really tough one to broach. I can see the merit of it, but again, even if we did move to a 4-day working week, I suspect we'd still have the occasional overtime or a bit of a shift that would come in on a 5th day to just cope with, with mopping up those additional bits or dispatches that don't quite make it on day 4. So yeah, interesting one.
It's been quite an eye-opener for me, actually, moving from automotive, where it was, hundreds of people turn up at exactly 8 o'clock on a night to get to the shift, and it's, it's a complete changeover. In Domino, even I've been there 15 years, but even before my time, it's been much more flexible, and there are people that will turn up at 9 o'clock in the morning. There are people that start at 6:30 in the morning to suit their circumstance. Obviously, there's some areas of the process where we've got to have people in the flow line, but there are many sub-assembly areas where we've got that flexibility, and we encourage and allow it as much as possible.
Great, thank you. I'm very aware of time, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to say any questions that are in the chat, we'll go through them and make sure that there's anything picked up so that when we send out our follow-up email, we'll just ensure we've asked for even a small response from our speakers. And we'll stay for a moment after I've done what I'm doing now, but I just want to say before everyone goes that Claire, who is our PrOPEL Hub colleague in Strathclyde University, has put in the chat a link to our feedback form. And I know everyone has death by feedback forms at the moment, so I know it's hard, but it would be lovely if you could fill that in for us, not least because we offer these masterclasses and workshops free, and we would love to continue doing so. So if you are able to give us any feedback, we could either improve if you've got a criticism or lap up the praise if you've got some praise for us as well. So please do take a moment to do that for us. We've also got a series of PrOPEL Hub events which are coming up in the future. As I said earlier, it's an initiative across many UK universities and the CIPD to improve workplaces in the UK, both from the point of view of productivity and from well-being. So there's quite a range of topics, and if I can get it up, I'm just going to share with you a screen so you can see what we've coming up to give you a flavour of that. So that should be there at the moment. So we've got things like work-life experience during the COVID pandemic, evidence from the USA, opportunities to enhance gender equality, importance of family history and place for trade unions, and embedding resilience in the everyday workplace. That's one of mine. So if you want to join me on the 26th of October with my colleague Nicola Murray. And then managing people for engagement, innovation and productivity. And that's just in October. So don't forget to visit propelhub.org to sign up to our newsletter to get regular notification of what's going on and check out our events. We are quite active and we always are happy to take ideas as well. So the other thing I wanted to say is that we're really fortunate at the moment within the PrOPEL Hub to be able to offer small workshops to individual organisations about workplace wellbeing. So these would be run by myself and colleagues, and we can join your organisation to talk through some of the research that suggests what you can do to improve workplace wellbeing, but also hear your perspectives and develop your approaches in that collaborative way. So if you're interested in that, I'm going to put my email address in the chat shortly, and you can request a workshop on workplace wellbeing. I'm absolutely fascinated that a few of you have said you don't like the terminology wellbeing, and you know, it would be interesting to get a sense, especially on those feedback forms, if you like, about what in manufacturing you think would be a better term. And you know, Katie's given me an interesting look there, as if she's thought this through before. So what I'll do now is I'll finish up our session formally and thank everybody. Thank you to Fiona, our Pro-Vice-Chancellor for Research and Innovation at the University of East Anglia, for starting us off, showing us her passion for manufacturing and really setting the scene well at the start. Thank you to Rebecca for her amazing tool that people can get in touch with her about and find out more how to deal with competing interests. Thank you to Katie for that incredibly honest, really fascinating insight into what's been going on during the pandemic, and just, you know, those few thoughts that I think will resonate for me about keeping it simple and following your values when things get tough. And then to Carl for sharing his ideas on lean, and you know, this idea that we shouldn't forget the non-utilised talent within every organisation. And I think that's something that went across all the talks, is that people are sometimes thought of in organisations when we talk about well-being as possibly a problem or an area of cynicism. But if you focus on non-utilised talent and really hearing from people and getting that wisdom from everyone within your organisation, it can reap benefits. So thank you very much all.
And thank you, Helen, and the PrOPEL Hub team as well.
You're very welcome. Do join us for more events, and we'll end there. Thank you.